The courtroom was cold. Not the kind of cold that came from air conditioning, but the kind that sank into the bones, the kind that belonged to grief, to fear, to the silence that fell after too much had already been said. Rows of wooden benches groaned beneath the weight of eyes that refused to blink. The girl sat in the front, her wrists cuffed to the table, the steel biting into skin that still bore faint bruises from the night everything had happened. Her name was Lena Harrow, 16 years old, a quiet student from a quiet town, and now, a convicted murderer. The judge adjusted his glasses and looked down at her with an expression that carried both exhaustion and disbelief. His words had not yet left his mouth, but everyone in the room could feel the sentence long before it was spoken. The district attorney, a man known for his composure, sat like a statue, motionless, yet charged with victory. On the defense side, Lena's public defender stared at the floor, his lips twitching with something that wasn't quite regret, but close enough to haunt him for years. Lena Marie Harrow, the judge began, voice steady, deliberate, and devoid of comfort. This court finds you guilty of the first-degree murder of your mother, Evelyn Harrow. Given the premeditation, the brutality of the act, and your complete lack of remorse, you are hereby sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The words struck the air like a bullet. Lena didn't flinch. She didn't cry. Her eyes, gray, almost metallic, didn't even flicker toward the man who had just sealed her fate. Instead, she whispered something no one caught, not even the bailiff who stood a step behind her. The courtroom buzzed with murmurs. Somewhere in the back, a woman gasped. Evelyn's sister, unable to comprehend how the quiet niece she once bought birthday presents for could become this. Reporters scribbled furiously. Cameras flashed. The judge's gavel came down, sharp and final. The sound echoed through the hall like a hammer striking a coffin lid. But justice, as the crowd saw it, wasn't the end. It was just the surface of something much deeper. The story behind Lena Harrow was a labyrinth of whispers, late-night screams, and secrets that the town had been too polite to confront. That night, the night of the murder, had been one of those evenings where everything looked ordinary from the outside. A small house, lights still on at 10:43 p.m., the faint hum of a television playing some old crime show, and the scent of burnt pasta clinging to the air. But inside, the kitchen had turned into a war zone. Neighbors would later testify they heard shouting, the kind that sounded personal, not just anger, but betrayal. And then, the unmistakable crash of glass breaking, followed by a silence so absolute that even the crickets outside seemed to have stopped. When the police arrived, Evelyn Harrow was lying in a pool of blood near the kitchen counter. A knife, 8-inch chef steel, was found lodged halfway beneath her ribs. Her daughter, Lena, was sitting on the floor beside her, covered in blood but calm, staring at her own hands as though they belonged to someone else. When the officers pulled her up and cuffed her, she said only one thing. It had to be done. That sentence became the heart of the trial. The prosecution painted her as cold, manipulative, a child who had planned her mother's death days in advance. They had the text messages, the deleted notes recovered from her phone, even a voice recording taken accidentally by a friend during a call the night before the murder. In it, Lena's voice was faint but clear. She won't let me go. Not until she's gone. But what did she mean by let me go? The defense argued it was years of psychological abuse, emotional manipulation, strict control, the kind that leaves invisible scars. But the evidence never quite aligned. Lena had been a top student, well-fed, well-kept, even well-liked by teachers. There were no reports of domestic violence, no school counselor complaints, nothing but the eerie calm of a household that seemed picture-perfect. Until you looked closer. Detective Rowan Hale, the lead investigator, had been on the force for 17 years. He'd seen everything, or thought he had, until the Harrow case landed on his desk. From the start, something about it refused to fit into the usual narrative. A teenage girl stabbing her mother 23 times wasn't just rage. It was ritual. It was something far more methodical. When Hale questioned Lena after the arrest, she didn't ask for a lawyer right away. She didn't plead for help. She just sat there, silent, until he asked the one question that broke through her shell. "Why did you do it, Lena?" She looked up, meeting his gaze for the first time, and said softly, "You wouldn't understand. Try me." Her lips curved in something that wasn't quite a smile. "Because she wasn't who you think she was." Those words had echoed in Hale's mind for weeks. They haunted him through the sleepless nights before trial, through the discovery of the hidden documents in Evelyn Harrow's study, through the photographs, old, burned, and half-torn, that hinted at a family history far darker than anyone had known. Evelyn, it turned out, wasn't just a single mother struggling to raise her daughter. She'd changed her name 15 years earlier after the mysterious disappearance of her husband, Lena's father. No body was ever found, no charges filed. But buried deep in archived police records, Hale found something chilling. Evelyn had once been a suspect. During trial, this revelation almost tore the case open again. The defense tried to argue that Lena had discovered her mother's involvement in her father's death, that she'd acted out of fear and confusion. But the judge deemed the evidence circumstantial. The prosecution countered with motive, insurance money, resentment, the classic pattern of teenage rebellion turned homicidal. Yet, despite all the facts, despite the photographs, notes, and testimonies, there was one thing that refused to make sense. Lena's expression during the verdict. Not anger, not sadness, not even defiance. It was relief, as if the sentence itself had freed her from something invisible. When the bailiff let her out, her eyes lingered for a moment on Detective Hale, who stood near the back of the courtroom. A flicker of something passed between them, a silent understanding that justice, as the court saw it, wasn't the full truth. And as she disappeared behind the doors leading to the holding cells, Hale felt that same cold settle deep in his bones, the one that told him the case wasn't really over. Because somewhere beneath the surface, in the ashes of the Harrow home, there was still something left to uncover. The prison transport rolled out of the courthouse parking lot under a gray afternoon sky. Rain began to fall, light at first, then steady, streaking down the tinted glass like tears trying to find their way inside. Lena sat in the back seat, chained to the bench, her reflection faint in the window. The cuffs dug into her wrists again, the same cold steel that had followed her from courtroom to cell to van. She didn't move, didn't cry. The officer sitting across from her tried not to look directly at her, but every now and then his eyes betrayed him. There was something unnerving about how still she was, like the violence had drained not only her emotions but her humanity. Inside her mind, though, a storm raged. Each clang of the van's suspension against the road sent flashes of memory she couldn't suppress. The knife handle slick in her hand, her mother's voice breaking mid-plea, the sharp, shocking silence that came after the final stab. The image replayed in fragments, not horror, but clarity. There was no satisfaction in what she'd done, only the sense that it was inevitable. At the same time, Detective Rowan Hale sat in his car in the same parking lot, watching the van's taillights vanish into the rain. He should have felt closure. Instead, all he felt was a hollow ache sitting right beneath his ribs. Something about the case refused to settle. Every crime, every confession, every piece of evidence told him the story was finished, but his instincts, the ones sharpened over nearly 2 decades, whispered otherwise. He lit a cigarette, something he hadn't done in years, and opened his notebook. Scrawled inside were 3 words that Lena had said during interrogation. She wasn't who you think she was. He underlined them again, the ink digging deep into the paper. Later that night, he returned to the Harrow house, now sealed, yellow tape fluttering in the rain. It had been cleaned for evidence processing, but the atmosphere was still heavy, oppressive, like the walls themselves remembered what had happened. He walked through the room slowly, flashlight in hand, the beam sweeping across empty picture frames, toppled furniture, and a faint copper stain on the kitchen tile. He stopped by the hallway mirror, the one cracked diagonally from the night of the fight. On the corner of the frame, half hidden by a strip of wallpaper, he noticed something small and metallic, a key, old, bronze, and worn. He pried it free and pocketed it. In the basement, there was a storage trunk that evidence techs had logged but never opened, sealed with a heavy lock. Hale crouched, tried the key. It clicked. Inside, dust motes swirled in the light. Folders, photographs, and several notebooks lay stacked neatly, too deliberate to be forgotten. He pulled one free, flipping through the pages. Names, dates, notes written in Evelyn Harrow's elegant handwriting. At first, it looked like medical records, except the dates didn't match. Then, halfway through, a line caught his eye. LM, observation unstable. Increasing resistance. May require final intervention. He froze. LM, Lena Marie. His pulse quickened. The handwriting wasn't distant or professional. It was clinical, detached, as if Evelyn had been documenting her own daughter. He flipped to another page. More entries. Subject demonstrates prolonged emotional detachment. Sleep irregularities. Avoids eye contact. Mentions dreams again. Hale's throat went dry. Whatever Evelyn was doing, it wasn't the behavior of a normal parent. The rest of the pages detailed bizarre behavioral experiments, daily logs, and psychological terms far beyond anything a civilian should have known. Some were dated as far back as when Lena was 9. He found a final note dated 2 days before the murder, termination scheduled. Subject will not cooperate voluntarily. The word termination sent a chill through him. If Lena had found this, or worse, if Evelyn had tried to act on it, then everything about the case shifted. The girl's motive might not have been hate. It might have been survival. But there was something else. A photograph, wedged between pages. It showed Evelyn, a man, and a small child. Lena, maybe 4 or 5 years old. The man's face was half burned from age and damage, but his arm tattoo was visible, a serpent coiled around a cross. Hale frowned. He'd seen that tattoo before. In a police report from 15 years ago, the disappearance of one Caleb Harrow, Evelyn's husband. According to the file, Caleb had been involved in a fringe behavioral research program, privately funded, experimental, unlicensed. It had vanished shortly after his death. Evelyn had moved states, changed her name, and reinvented her life. But it wasn't just reinvention, it was hiding. Hale's hands trembled slightly as he closed the trunk. Whatever this family had been involved in, it went deeper than domestic conflict. And somehow, Lena had grown up inside it. The next morning, he met with ADA Carla Niles, the prosecutor who'd secured the conviction. She was sharp, uncompromising, and had no patience for post-trial speculation. Hale laid out what he'd found. The notebooks, the logs, the entries suggesting Evelyn had been observing her daughter like a research subject. Niles frowned, flipping through one of the photocopies. This doesn't prove abuse. It proves eccentricity. You know as well as I do. Hale, the case is closed. It proves intent, he countered. She was planning something. Maybe to harm her daughter. Maybe she'd already started. You saw those wounds on Lena's arms, the old ones. The defense couldn't explain them. But what if? She killed her mother. Niles interrupted, voice firm. 23 stab wounds. You think she was defending herself with that kind of overkill? Hale hesitated. I think she snapped. But not out of malice. Out of fear. Niles sighed, pushed the papers back toward him. There's no room for maybes in a closed file. But even as she walked away, Hale could see it in her eyes, the faint crack of doubt. He spent the next few days digging into Evelyn's background, tracing her employment history, bank accounts, and known associates. Most led nowhere. But one address stood out, an unlisted property outside town, registered under a shell name, but funded through Evelyn's old account. When he arrived, it was dusk. The property was isolated, the kind of place where no one would hear a scream. The door was locked, but the side window was shattered, the edges crusted with dust. Inside, the air was thick, heavy with the smell of chemicals. The walls were lined with file cabinets and medical diagrams. Photographs of children, some with faces marked out, others labeled with numbers. Hale's stomach twisted. He found a whiteboard near the back wall, covered in scrawled notes. Conditioning Trial 03B. Memory suppression. Adaptive resistance levels increasing. Subject HM, 2 deceased. Subject LM ongoing. LM again. He stepped closer. The handwriting was identical to Evelyn's. Next to the notes was a calendar. The last entry was dated the day before the murder. Phase 5. Initiate final observation. A noise came from behind him, soft, almost like a breath. He spun, gun drawn, flashlight cutting through the dark. Nothing. Just shadows. But the air shifted. Someone had been here recently. He moved toward a stack of folders on the table, flipping through photographs, medical scans, EEG readings, and reports all signed with initials EH. Whatever Evelyn had been doing, it wasn't a scientific project anymore. It was obsession. As Hale stepped outside into the fading light, he realized something that made his blood run cold. The house's windows had been covered, not from the inside, but the outside. Whoever she'd been observing, She hadn't wanted anyone watching her back. That night, he couldn't sleep. He stared at the ceiling, replaying Lena's words in his head. She wasn't who you think she was. He believed her now. But proving it, that was another story. At the women's correctional facility, Lena sat in her new cell, staring through the bars at nothing. The guards had learned not to talk to her. There was something in her silence that made people uneasy. She spent hours drawing on scraps of paper, circles, lines, patterns that looked almost mathematical. When a guard asked what she was drawing, she simply said, "Memories." He laughed at first, until she added, without looking up, "Not all of them are mine." Detective Rowan Hale arrived at the precinct before sunrise, the city still drowning in fog. The station lights hummed with that dim, bureaucratic exhaustion that comes from too many coffee pots and too few answers. Hale walked straight to the evidence room, badge flashing, eyes dark from sleepless nights. He'd filed for extended review of the Harrow case, officially to close loose ends, unofficially to dig deeper into what nobody wanted to touch. He slid the file marked Harrow, Evelyn, homicide victim onto the metal table. It was supposed to contain everything: the scene reports, autopsy details, witness statements. But what caught his attention was what wasn't there. The appendix listing personal effects, missing. The original psychiatric evaluation, gone. Someone had pulled documents after the trial. He stared at the inventory sheet, tracing a line of text with his thumb. Evidence Box 2B. Confidential transfer order, signed by District Clerk J. Wexler. The signature looked wrong. The J looped differently than Wexler's normal penmanship. Hale had seen his handwriting dozens of times. Someone had forged the transfer. He checked the database. No record of where the contents had been sent. Not federal storage, not state archives. It was like the second box never existed. He exhaled slowly, grabbed his coat, and left without saying a word. The drive to the clerk's office took 20 minutes. The clerk, Wexler, was already there, a wiry man with the expression of someone perpetually confused by his own paperwork. Hale dropped the file on his desk. "Morning," Hale said, voice low. "You authorized a transfer for the Harrow evidence." Wexler blinked, confused. "I don't recall that case." "You signed it." The clerk leaned forward, squinting at the signature. "That's not my handwriting." Hale's jaw clenched. "Then someone used your name. Who else has access?" "Just me and the assistant on rotation last month. She quit 2 weeks ago." "What's her name?" "Melinda Cross." The name hit him like a sharp chord. He remembered her, a young intern who'd shadowed the prosecution during the Harrow trial. She'd handled evidence tagging, and she'd vanished right after sentencing. By noon, Hale had her address pulled from HR. The building was downtown, low rent, old paint peeling from the brick. He climbed 3 flights of stairs and knocked on her door. No answer. He waited, knocked again, harder. Still nothing. He was about to leave when he noticed the faint smell, not rot, but something acrid. Chemical. He drew his gun, stepped back, and kicked the door open. The apartment was dim. Curtains drawn. The air thick with ammonia. On the floor, a half-packed suitcase, clothes scattered. The TV still on, static humming. And near the kitchen counter, Melinda Cross, motionless. He rushed forward, checked her pulse. Gone. No visible wounds. Her phone was on the table, screen cracked. He grabbed it, hit the power button. Locked. Then he noticed the open laptop on the counter. On the screen, a single window still active, a scanned document titled EH Archive, Phase Records. Beneath the title, Restricted Access / Project Eve. The cursor blinked. No password prompt, just a list of entries. HM 2, SJ 4, LM 1. He clicked LM 1. The file opened to a photo. Lena, about 12. Cables attached to her temples, eyes closed, faint bruises along her jawline. A log entry below. Subject demonstrates heightened empathic response, rapid memory recovery under stimulus. Duration, 3 hours before resistance threshold. Hale felt sick. This wasn't theory anymore. This was proof. Evelyn Harrow had used her daughter in experimental trials, some kind of cognitive research disguised as therapy. He scrolled down. Another entry. Test result. Successful pattern recognition beyond expected range. Subject retention high. Next phase. Emotional isolation required for continued observation. A noise snapped him back. Footsteps in the hallway. He turned, weapon ready. Silence. then the faint creak of the floor outside. He moved toward the door quietly, listening. Nothing. When he turned back, the laptop screen had gone dark. Power cut. Shit. He ripped out the drive, shoved it into his pocket. He called it in, a possible homicide. Within an hour, the place was crawling with uniforms and forensics. The medical examiner confirmed no visible trauma, but signs of cardiac arrest likely induced by chemical exposure, maybe poison. The air samples would take days to process, but Hale already knew. Someone wanted to erase her. That night, he sat in his car with the laptop drive connected to his own computer. He decrypted what he could. Not everything survived the sudden power cut, but enough remained to paint a terrifying picture. Project Eve appeared to be an unauthorized human experiment, focused on manipulating neural pathways to enhance emotional perception, empathy weaponized as control. Evelyn wasn't a rogue scientist. She'd been part of something organized, something bigger. Several files mentioned funding from an entity only referred to as the Helix Foundation. Hale searched for it. Nothing in public databases. But a single line in a 2007 state grant report showed a matching name. Research grant withdrawn after ethical violation inquiry. The director listed on that file, Dr. Caleb Harrow, Lena's father. He leaned back in his seat, the realization hitting like a train. Evelyn hadn't changed her name just to hide. She'd been burying an entire operation. And if Caleb had been the original founder, Evelyn had continued the work alone after his death, or what everyone assumed was his death. Hale zoomed in on one of the photos in the recovered files, a lab shot. Several researchers in coats. One of them turned away. On the corner of his wrist, a faint tattoo, the serpent and cross. His hand froze on the mouse. Caleb Harrow was still alive. The rain had turned to knives by the time Hale reached the edge of the city. He drove fast, wipers slapping like a heartbeat that wouldn't slow down. The flash drive lay on the seat beside him, its metal surface catching stray light from passing cars. Every second that passed, he could feel someone else closing in on the same information. He hit the brakes outside a crumbling industrial complex. 3 hangars, fenced, locked, and supposedly abandoned. Paperwork said the property belonged to a shell company called Helix Logistics. It was the first real lead tying Caleb Harrow to the modern world. Hale stepped out, gun ready, breath fogging in the cold. He forced the padlock with a crowbar, the steel snapping loud enough to wake ghosts. Inside, the hangar smelled of dust and bleach. But there were footprints in the grime, fresh. He followed them, slow, flashlights sweeping across metal tables and scattered cables. Then he saw it. A wall of monitors still humming on backup power. On one screen, an archive window, Project Eve/Phase Continuation. The timestamp, less than a week old. He moved closer, scrolling through logs. Coordinates. Shipment manifests. Then a video file named Observation LM. His gut tightened. He hit play. The footage showed a sterile room, bright white. A girl, maybe 13, sat strapped to a chair, Lena. Electrodes on her temples. Her mother's voice off camera. Calm, scientific, terrifyingly detached. Subject responding to auditory stimulus. Increase frequency. Lena flinched, whispering something. Evelyn's voice sharpened. Focus, sweetheart. Tell me what you see. Static erupted. Then the screen went black. A sound behind him, metal scraping. Hale spun, flashlight beams slicing through the dark. A man stood near the door, tall, in a raincoat. Gun raised. Put it down, Hale barked. The man didn't move. His voice came out smooth, practiced. You shouldn't be here, detective. Who are you? Maintenance, the man said, and fired. The bullet grazed Hale's shoulder, ripping through fabric. He dropped behind a table, fired back twice. Glass exploded. The man ducked, sprinted toward the exit. Hale chased, pain burning down his arm. Outside, headlights flared. A black SUV roared to life. The shooter jumped in, doors slamming. Hale raised his weapon and shot out a tire, but the vehicle still lurched forward, fishtailing onto the road and vanishing into rain. Hale limped to his car, blood soaking his sleeve. He opened the trunk, grabbed his radio. Dispatch, this is Hale. I've got shots fired at the Helix site. Suspect fleeing westbound in black SUV, partial plate Echo 96. Static. Then, copy that. Backup en route. He leaned against the car, adrenaline crashing. Somewhere out there, Caleb Harrow, or someone working for him, had just tried to erase the last thread of truth. He looked back toward the hangar. The monitors were still flickering. The logo in the corner, a serpent coiled around a cross. Caleb's mark. Hale's car roared through the slick streets, tires cutting through puddles like knives. Rain slapped the windshield, masking the faint engine growl of the SUV ahead. He kept his eyes locked on the rearview mirror. The black vehicle flickered in and out of view, weaving through side streets like it knew the city better than he did. Every block he turned, every street he cut, Hale's heart pounded against the seatbelt. The drive wasn't just about pursuit, it was survival. Whoever he was chasing didn't hesitate to kill. His shoulder throbbed, bleeding through his jacket, but adrenaline muted the pain. He had one goal: get to Caleb Harrow. The SUV skidded into a warehouse district, tires squealing. Hale followed, hopping the curb, headlights cutting long shadows. The SUV stopped abruptly behind a chain-link fence. A man jumped out, ducking behind crates. Hale slammed on brakes, gun raised, breath ragged. He could see the hand signal before the first shot rang out. Hale dove behind a container. Bullets pinged metal around him. He waited, listening, the rain drowning out every other sound. Then movement, a shadow slipping along the roofline. Hale climbed a nearby ladder, careful not to make noise. From above, he could see the shooter crouched, scanning the area. He fired 2 shots from the roof, forcing the man to retreat into the warehouse interior. Hale descended and circled the building. The door was unlocked. He entered quietly. The air inside was thick with oil and dust, crates stacked in haphazard towers. Then he saw it, an underground hatch at the far end. He lifted it, peering down. A staircase led into darkness. He descended slowly, gun raised, flashlight sweeping the steps. The room below was massive. Screens lined one wall, flickering with live footage from several locations, all displaying children in clinical rooms, electrodes attached to their heads. Most were small, all under 10. The labels were clear: subject LM2, LM3. Hale froze. Lena's designation was repeated: LM1, LM2, LM3, suggesting multiple test subjects. Then he saw movement from the shadows. A man emerged, tall, skeletal, eyes sharp and calculating. Caleb Harrow. "You shouldn't be here," Caleb said, voice low, calm, precise. "They told me someone would come. I wondered who it would be." Hale raised his gun. "This ends tonight. No one else dies. No more experiments." Caleb smirked. "You still don't understand. This isn't just about survival. It's evolution." A siren wailed outside. Backup had finally arrived. Caleb's eyes darted to a hidden lever. He pressed it. A door sealed shut behind him. Hale fired twice, hitting monitors, sparks showering the floor. Caleb disappeared into a hidden corridor. Hale chased, heart hammering. He reached a dead end. No door. Nothing. But a sound, a faint ventilation hum, revealed a vent at shoulder height. Hale pried it open and crawled inside, the metal scraping his jacket. He followed the vent until it dropped him into a small lab. Tables were strewn with vials and notebooks. A centrifuge hummed. In the center, a young girl, Lena, sat strapped to a chair, eyes wide, terrified but composed. Caleb loomed behind her, needle in hand. Hale's gun barked twice. Caleb dropped the syringe, lunging for Hale. They collided, grappling, the fight brutal and short. Hale gained control, handcuffing Caleb against the table. Lena froze for a heartbeat, then slowly unstrapped herself. Hale's flashlight caught the fear and relief in her eyes. "You're safe now," he said, voice shaking with intensity. "No one else is going to hurt you." Lena nodded once, silently, the storm outside matching the chaos they'd just escaped. Backup officers stormed in, securing the lab, confiscating equipment. Hale handed Caleb over, finally able to breathe. The shadow of Project Eve, the Helix Foundation, and the Harrow family nightmare was over, at least for now. Lena, trembling, whispered, I thought no one would ever find me." Hale knelt beside her. "You're stronger than you know. And now, justice will be done." Outside, the rain continued to pour. Hale looked at the night sky, feeling the first sense of relief in weeks. The chase was over. But the story, the horror of what had been done, would echo long after. And Lena, the girl who survived it all, was finally free from the shadow of her mother and the man who had once claimed to be her father. The morning sun struggled through thick clouds as Hale drove Lena to a secure facility. She was quiet, hands folded in her lap, eyes distant but alert. The ride was long, each mile a reminder that the nightmare was far from over. While Caleb was in custody, the Helix Foundation wasn't just one man. Hale knew that. There were layers, hidden connections, and people with influence who could make evidence disappear with a single phone call. At the facility, Lena was greeted by child psychologists and protective officers. Hale handed over the flash drive and all documents recovered from the warehouse. The staff immediately began documenting everything, taking note of the experiments, the chemical agents, and the files connecting her mother and Caleb. Every detail mattered. Each notation could prevent future harm. Hale walked outside, hands deep in his pockets, watching Lena disappear into the building. The city around him was waking, oblivious to the storm that had passed in its underbelly. But his instincts screamed, the fight wasn't over. He returned to the precinct, immediately requesting a meeting with ADA Niles. She met him in a conference room, a stack of files in her arms. "There's a problem," she said bluntly. "Some of the Helix-related accounts trace back to people with direct ties to law enforcement and state officials. If this gets out, it'll blow the entire system apart." Hale nodded. "I know. I've already found a few of them. Officers who were quietly moving evidence or keeping tabs on the experiments." Niles pinched the bridge of her nose. "We have to proceed carefully. If we expose too much too soon, Caleb's network disappears, and we lose every chance of bringing justice." Hale leaned back in his chair, thinking. Every contact he had, every surveillance feed, and every informant he'd ever cultivated suddenly mattered. He began mapping connections, tracing accounts, and confirming identities. Names surfaced, some he knew, some he didn't. He realized the depth of the corruption. The network was organized, structured, even disciplined. It wasn't just about illegal experimentation. It was about maintaining control, silencing witnesses, and perpetuating a system that protected itself. Meanwhile, Lena began therapy, slowly recounting the experiments, the isolation, and the forced memory tests. Psychologists documented every word, every reaction. Her resilience stunned them. At 16, she had survived what few adults could endure. Her testimony would be critical. Every detail she remembered, every log she could confirm, strengthened the case against the network. Hale continued his surveillance. Days blurred into nights as he tracked leads, connected contacts, and worked to identify the Helix operatives still active. One name kept recurring: Melanie Voss, an administrator who had orchestrated transfers and supervised the experiments in Caleb's absence. Voss had remained a ghost in the system, leaving a paper trail almost invisible, but it was there if you knew where to look. Hale initiated a sting. They set up a decoy shipment to a warehouse outside town, broadcasting the operation as if it were real. Voss took the bait. She arrived, confident, unaware that cameras had been set and police were concealed. The moment she opened the container, officers moved in. She struggled briefly, then realized she was caught. Hale stepped forward, keeping his weapon trained, voice steady but cold. "It's over. The network ends here." As Voss was cuffed, Hale felt a flicker of relief but knew this was only one battle in a much larger war. The Helix Foundation's influence extended beyond the city, into corporate funding, international connections, and the shadows of research labs that no one monitored. Each operative apprehended revealed another layer, another set of hidden players. In the following days, Lena's legal status became a point of public interest. News agencies picked up the story of her mother's experiments, the Helix Foundation, and the horrific abuse she endured. Public outrage fueled investigations, and government agencies promised oversight. Hale, however, remained cautious. Publicity could be dangerous. The wrong exposure could alert remaining network members to cover their tracks. Hale visited Lena again at the secure facility, sitting across from her as she drew patterns on a pad. "You're safe now," he said, voice low. "No one can hurt you anymore." She looked up, eyes tired but defiant. "I know," she whispered. "But will anyone really stop them?" Hale didn't answer immediately. In his mind, the road ahead was long, full of shadows and unknown adversaries. He knew that while Caleb and Voss were in custody, the Foundation's roots were deep. But for now, Lena had a chance to rebuild. and that was worth everything he had left. Outside, the sun finally broke through the clouds. Hale stared at the city skyline, rain-slicked streets glimmering in the morning light. Justice had been served, at least in part. But in the distance, the subtle hum of power and influence reminded him that the fight to dismantle the Helix network had only just begun. Weeks passed, each day pushing Hale closer to the heart of the Helix Foundation. Every lead, every trace of correspondence, revealed the network's staggering depth. What had seemed like an isolated rogue operation was in fact a sprawling web spanning multiple cities, dozens of labs, and a cadre of silent operatives embedded within law enforcement and corporate oversight committees. Hale's phone buzzed late one evening. It was an unmarked number. He answered cautiously. A distorted voice whispered, "You think you've won, detective? You've only scratched the surface. Look inside your own precinct." The line went dead. Hale's stomach sank. Someone inside the department was feeding the Helix Foundation information. Every piece of evidence, every movement, had likely been watched. He started cross-referencing recent security footage, checking emails and access logs. Patterns emerged. A mid-level officer, someone with clearance to handle sensitive evidence, had multiple unexplained absences and unauthorized file downloads. Hale traced the digital trail. It led to a storage locker rented under a false identity. Inside were documents, bank records, and blueprints for multiple underground labs. Meanwhile, Lena's testimony in the secure facility began to take shape. She recounted her memories with clarity, articulating not just the experiments, but her mother's meticulous documentation of every psychological response. Her insights were precise, almost clinical, and became essential for building the case against remaining operatives. Psychologists noted how her resilience and detailed recollections made her testimony unusually compelling, especially for someone her age. Hale coordinated a sting operation targeting the storage locker. SWAT moved in silently before dawn. They found not just papers but chemicals, experimental equipment, and several partially completed devices meant for psychological manipulation. Officers were shaken. The scale of the Helix Foundation's reach was almost incomprehensible. Hale cataloged everything, knowing that each item was a thread leading back to hidden players. Then came betrayal. The officer Hale had suspected, Officer Kenton, slipped past custody. Hale realized someone higher up had tipped him off. Kenton vanished with critical documents. Hale understood then that the network had allies at the top, people who could make anyone disappear with the right orders. The realization was chilling. The fight was no longer just about stopping Caleb and Voss. It was about rooting out systemic corruption. Publicly, the investigation maintained a facade of procedural success. Voss and Caleb faced trial. The media celebrated Hale's efforts, and Lena was portrayed as a survivor of unimaginable horror. Privately, Hale worked in the shadows, tracking down every lead, monitoring communications, and planning his next move. He couldn't trust anyone fully, not after the whisper in the night and Kenton's escape. Late one night, Hale received a package. Inside was a single flash drive with the words, "For Lena," on it. Files containing digital copies of every Phase Eve record, hidden and encrypted, evidence Evelyn and Caleb had never wanted to see the light of day. Hale knew this was a turning point. Lena would have the power to testify comprehensively, to bring down every remaining operative, provided they could be located and apprehended. Hale leaned back, exhaustion weighing on him. He looked at the rain streaking the window, realizing the city's darkness was deeper than he had imagined. The Helix Foundation's shadows were long, their tendrils deep. But for the first time, he felt a measure of hope. With Lena's testimony and the evidence in hand, justice could reach beyond the walls of a single courtroom. They could dismantle a network that had operated in silence for years. Outside, the night rumbled with distant thunder, mirroring the tension inside Hale's mind. He knew the fight was far from over, but each step forward brought them closer to exposing the full horror of the Helix Foundation and giving Lena the future she deserved. The city had gone quiet, deceptively so, as Hale and Lena mapped the Helix Foundation's remaining nodes. Each lead was a thread, and every thread risked snapping under pressure. Hale worked nights, scanning communications, tracing encrypted messages, and analyzing financial transactions. Lena, once the silent survivor, now became an active participant, her mind sharp and methodical, able to cross-reference her memories with digital files, pinpointing locations and names that had eluded him. The first break came unexpectedly. An email, traced to a public library computer, contained coordinates. They led to a nondescript warehouse on the outskirts of the city. Hale and a tactical team arrived at dawn, guns drawn, flashlights sweeping. Inside, they found a small cadre of operatives, busy erasing hard drives and burning documents. The team apprehended them swiftly, but Hale noticed one escape route left untouched, a flaw too convenient. The operatives exchanged subtle signals, like shadows passing in the dark, indicating there was someone higher, orchestrating from afar. Lena examined the seized drives. Her eyes darted across the encrypted files, deciphering patterns she had once experienced firsthand. "These are only regional records," she said. "The real operation is still active. They're hiding the master servers." Hale nodded grimly. She was right. Despite their captures, the Foundation's core remained a phantom. Weeks turned into a relentless chase. Surveillance footage showed the remaining operatives switching vehicles, changing identities, slipping through the cracks. Hale's patience and experience were tested. One night, in a high-stakes stakeout, they spotted a familiar black SUV. Hale recognized it instantly. Caleb Harrow had accomplices still moving in the shadows. He signaled Lena to stay back and gave chase, weaving through the rain-soaked streets. The SUV led them to a warehouse district, and as Hale approached, a hidden gunner opened fire. Hale dove behind a dumpster, bullets tearing metal and concrete around him. The operatives fled through a maze of back alleys, disappearing into the night. Each encounter escalated the tension, revealing the Foundation's operational depth. Inside the precinct, leaks were constantly monitored. Hale knew Kenton was still at large, feeding information, and that some higher-ups were compromised. Each discovery demanded caution. Every move was a calculated risk. Lena suggested a bold move, to bait the remaining network using herself as the lure. "They'll respond to me. They think I'm still vulnerable," she said, determination burning in her eyes. Hale hesitated. It was dangerous, but she was right. The network underestimated her, as everyone had once done. With careful planning, they set up a digital trail, sending falsified records and encrypted signals that suggested she had new evidence ready for transfer. The bait worked immediately. Within 48 hours, operatives were moving. Hale and his team tracked them to a high-rise under renovation, a location chosen to isolate potential threats. Officers positioned at every entry point. Lena, monitoring from a safe control room, guided Hale through digital feeds, identifying patterns and predicting the operatives' moves. It was a tense game of cat and mouse, every second a potential threat. Inside the building, Hale advanced slowly, weapon ready, flashlights slicing through the darkness. Shadows moved. He identified a familiar figure, Kenton. Heart pounding, Hale followed him into a back room. The door slammed shut. Kenton smirked, reaching for a concealed weapon. Hale was faster, disarming him with precision, handcuffing him in one fluid motion. Kenton's defiance faltered under Hale's unyielding gaze. Outside, the rest of the operatives were captured in coordinated sweeps. Lena watched, a quiet satisfaction in her expression. Every capture revealed more about the Foundation's hierarchy, the depth of the corruption, and the lengths to which the operatives would go to protect themselves. With Kenton in custody and the regional operatives neutralized, the Helix network's grip weakened substantially, but Hale knew this was only the beginning. The true masterminds were still out there, watching, waiting. Hale left the building and looked at Lena, illuminated by the cold light of the city skyline. "You were right," he said. "They underestimated you. That was our edge." She nodded, but her eyes betrayed the weight of what they had seen, what she had survived, and what they still had to face. The city was quiet again, but Hale knew the shadows were still moving, and the final confrontation was yet to come. The city had gone quiet, deceptively so, as Hale and Lena mapped the Helix Foundation's remaining nodes. Each lead was a thread, and every thread risked snapping under pressure. Hale worked nights, scanning communications, tracing encrypted messages, and analyzing financial transactions. Lena, once the silent survivor, now became an active participant, her mind sharp and methodical, able to cross-reference her memories with digital files, pinpointing locations and names that had eluded him. The first break came unexpectedly. An email, traced to a public library computer, contained coordinates. They led to a nondescript warehouse on the outskirts of the city. Hale and a tactical team arrived at dawn, guns drawn, flashlights sweeping. Inside, they found a small cadre of operatives, busy erasing hard drives and burning documents. The team apprehended them swiftly, but Hale noticed one escape route left untouched, a flaw too convenient. The operatives exchanged subtle signals, like shadows passing in the dark, indicating there was someone higher, orchestrating from afar. Lena examined the seized drives. Her eyes darted across the encrypted files, deciphering patterns she had once experienced firsthand. "These are only regional records," she said. "The real operation is still active. They're hiding the master servers." Hale nodded grimly. She was right. Despite their captures, the Foundation's core remained a phantom. Weeks turned into a relentless chase. Surveillance footage showed the remaining operatives switching vehicles, changing identities, slipping through the cracks. Hale's patience and experience were tested. One night, in a high-stakes stakeout, they spotted a familiar black SUV. Hale recognized it instantly. Caleb Harrow had accomplices still moving in the shadows. He signaled Lena to stay back and gave chase, weaving through the rain-soaked streets. The SUV led them to a warehouse district, and as Hale approached, a hidden gunner opened fire. Hale dove behind a dumpster, bullets tearing metal and concrete around him. The operatives fled through a maze of back alleys, disappearing into the night. Each encounter escalated the tension, revealing the Foundation's operational depth. Inside the precinct, leaks were constantly monitored. Hale knew Kenton was still at large, feeding information, and that some higher-ups were compromised. Each discovery demanded caution. Every move was a calculated risk. Lena suggested a bold move, to bait the remaining network using herself as the lure. "They'll respond to me. They think I'm still vulnerable," she said, determination burning in her eyes. Hale hesitated. It was dangerous, but she was right. The network underestimated her, as everyone had once done. With careful planning, they set up a digital trail, sending falsified records and encrypted signals that suggested she had new evidence ready for transfer. The bait worked immediately. Within 48 hours, operatives were moving. Hale and his team tracked them to a high-rise under renovation, a location chosen to isolate potential threats. Officers positioned at every entry point. Lena, monitoring from a safe control room, guided Hale through digital feeds, identifying patterns and predicting the operatives' moves. It was a tense game of cat and mouse, every second a potential threat. Inside the building, Hale advanced slowly, weapon ready, flashlights slicing through the darkness. Shadows moved. He identified a familiar figure, Kenton. Heart pounding, Hale followed him into a back room. The door slammed shut. Kenton smirked, reaching for a concealed weapon. Hale was faster, disarming him with precision, handcuffing him in one fluid motion. Kenton's defiance faltered under Hale's unyielding gaze. Outside, the rest of the operatives were captured in coordinated sweeps. Lena watched, a quiet satisfaction in her expression. Every capture revealed more about the Foundation's hierarchy, the depth of the corruption, and the lengths to which the operatives would go to protect themselves. With Kenton in custody and the regional operatives neutralized, the Helix network's grip weakened substantially, but Hale knew this was only the beginning. The true masterminds were still out there, watching, waiting. Hale left the building and looked at Lena, illuminated by the cold light of the city skyline. "You were right," he said. "They underestimated you. That was our edge." She nodded, but her eyes betrayed the weight of what they had seen, what she had survived, and what they still had to face. The city was quiet again, but Hale knew the shadows were still moving, and the final confrontation was yet to come. The courthouse was packed, the air thick with anticipation. Reporters jostled for space, cameras flashed, and outside, protesters and advocates for justice gathered in a tense, expectant crowd. Inside, the courtroom was silent, save for the low hum of whispered conversations. The stakes were monumental. Caleb Harrow, Evelyn Harrow, and the remaining Helix operatives were to face trial for their crimes, and Lena, now 16, was the linchpin of the prosecution's case. Hale sat beside Lena, providing quiet reassurance. She had grown into her role with remarkable composure, understanding that her testimony would not only bring her family's abusers to justice, but could prevent future atrocities. The prosecution laid out the case meticulously, presenting evidence collected from the warehouses, the hidden labs, and the encrypted drives recovered through Hale's relentless investigation. The courtroom drama intensified when Voss, the captured administrator, was called to testify. Under intense cross-examination, she revealed the operational details of the Helix Foundation, confirming the systematic abuse of children and the orchestration of Project Eve across multiple states. Her testimony was chilling, but precise. It painted a horrifying picture that left the jury visibly shaken. When Lena took the stand, the room fell silent. Her voice, steady and unwavering, recounted the experiments, her mother's duplicity, and the psychological and physical manipulation she endured. She described the cables, the electrodes, the memory tests, and the forced isolation. Her words resonated with clarity and courage. The court saw not only a victim but a survivor, whose insight had been pivotal in dismantling the Foundation's reach. During cross-examination, the defense tried to cast doubt, insinuating exaggeration and emotional bias. But Hale presented digital records, videos, photographs, and encrypted logs that corroborated Lena's testimony. Every detail she provided had a corresponding piece of evidence, leaving the defense unable to dismantle the narrative. The judge, stern and focused, maintained strict control, ensuring that the gravity of the crimes remained central. In a shocking turn, forensic psychologists testified that the experiments had profound effects on emotional and cognitive development. Their analysis confirmed that Evelyn and Caleb's manipulations were intentional and calculated, designed to exploit children's neurological vulnerabilities. This revelation added a new layer of weight to the proceedings, as the jury grasped the full extent of the crimes. Then came the final testimony, Caleb and Evelyn, forced to confront the full scale of their actions. Caleb, once confident and controlling, faltered under direct questioning. Evelyn, poised initially, could not maintain composure when confronted with the evidence and the testimony of her own daughter. The courtroom was tense, the weight of justice palpable. After days of hearings, the jury deliberated. Hours turned into a tense evening. Finally, the verdict was read aloud. Guilty on all counts. Life sentences without the possibility of parole were handed down to both Caleb and Evelyn. Voss and the remaining operatives received lengthy prison terms for their complicity. Hale exhaled, feeling the culmination of months of pursuit, investigation, and relentless effort. Lena, sitting beside him, allowed herself a small, relieved smile. Justice had been served, though the scars of her experience would linger. She had reclaimed her life, exposed the full horror of the Helix Foundation, and, with Hale's unwavering support, ensured that the perpetrators would never harm another child. Outside, the media captured the moment. Lena stepped into the sunlight, her silhouette strong and defiant. Hale followed, a quiet guardian witnessing the beginning of her freedom. The city, unaware of the silent battles fought in the shadows, had seen justice triumph in the courtroom, bringing an end to one of the darkest chapters of its history. The Helix Foundation had been dismantled, and the victims, including Lena, could finally begin the long path to healing. Weeks after the verdict, the city's rhythm slowly returned to normal, though the scars of the Helix Foundation lingered. Hale walked through the rain-slicked streets, the hum of traffic muted by mist. The courthouse steps, once a stage of chaos and tension, now stood quiet. Inside, the files had been archived, evidence meticulously catalogued for posterity, each piece a testament to months of relentless investigation. Lena had moved into a secure foster home, supported by psychologists, advocates, and Hale's quiet supervision. She spent her days in school, but the weight of her experiences remained in subtle ways, an alertness, a precision in thought, a quiet intensity in her gaze. She had become a symbol of resilience, a living testament to survival against orchestrated cruelty. Yet she was allowed space to grow, to heal, to be 16 beyond the shadows of her past. Hale often visited, sometimes sitting in the background during therapy sessions, other times accompanying her for walks in the park. Their relationship had evolved into one of trust and mentorship, a bond forged through shared danger and the relentless pursuit of justice. Hale reflected on the months of pursuit, the nights of endless surveillance, the confrontations in dimly lit warehouses, and the courtroom drama that had finally brought the perpetrators to account. Justice had been served, but the cost had been profound. The dismantling of the Helix Foundation sent ripples through law enforcement, government oversight, and public consciousness. Investigations were launched to ensure no remaining operatives had evaded capture. Policies were strengthened regarding research oversight and the protection of minors. Hale watched cautiously from the sidelines, aware that corruption and secrecy could never be entirely eradicated, but taking comfort in the tangible victories they had achieved. Lena, standing at the window of her new home one afternoon, watched sunlight reflect off the city streets below. Hale joined her silently. She turned and smiled, a brief but genuine gesture, carrying both the weight of survival and the first hints of freedom. "Do you think they'll ever really stop?" she asked softly. Hale considered the question, knowing the answer was complex. "Some things can't be stopped entirely," he said. "But what we can do is make sure the right people are held accountable. And that's what we've done." In the months that followed, Lena focused on school, therapy, and slowly reclaiming the ordinary pleasures of life. Hale continued his work in the shadows, vigilant, knowing that justice was rarely clean or complete, but satisfied that, for now, the darkness that had haunted Lena and so many others had been exposed and neutralized. The city moved on, unaware of the silent wars waged in its underbelly. Yet Hale and Lena, their paths intertwined through tragedy and determination, had forged a small island of justice amidst the shadows. And in that quiet, tentative victory, both found a sense of closure, a beginning to a life beyond the horrors that had defined their pasts. The Helix Foundation was dismantled, the perpetrators imprisoned. The victims, including Lena, were finally free to begin rebuilding. And while the echoes of their ordeal would never fully fade, the promise of survival, resilience, and justice endured, a testament to the courage of those who refused to remain silent in the face of darkness.